the Oculus Quest 2. Now, this isn't going to be a full-on review of this because this thing has been covered to death by just about everyone. Basically, it's good. Facebook's dodgy, but overall, it's the best value VR headset you can buy, period. And why is that so? For starters, and you do get a couple other ones that have like insanely high resolution, but this is just about the highest resolution per eye screen you get in a VR headset. But not just that, Oculus's lenses are some of the best lenses you get in just about any headset, because it's not a typical, and I know other ones are like this as well. The way that Oculus does it is kind of phenomenal. They're Fresnel lenses, meaning they're actually compounded magnifying lenses. That, coupled with the awesome screens that, I know when it first came out, it was limited to, I think, 72 Hertz. Currently, these can do up to 120 Hertz, depending on the game. But a lot of headsets do that. Okay, so the controllers. The controllers are, for me anyway, amazing. Now, I haven't used any of the Vive or the Vive or the Index controllers. However, the way that these feel and the way that you hold on to these when you're playing just feels unbelievably natural. So there's that. The one downside of it is if you're playing Beat Saber, which is probably my favorite VR game, they tend to start sliding out of your hand as you're going. And you've got to do a weird like jimmy back into your hand as you're going. But in almost everything else, these are perfect. And I know in the original Quest, the battery door had an issue of falling down because it was held in with magnets. However, on the Quest 2, it's got a nice plastic clip. So it's not really an issue. I haven't had it happen. With that being said, I'm pretty sure everyone would say, or whoever has whatever headset they have, would say that their controller is great. So, you know, I like this controller. It's really the only one I've used. It's not particularly lightweight for a headset. However, it's definitely not heavy. So there's that. It feels comfortable on the face, you know. These detach if they get worn down. You can take them off. These are all things that have been pretty much covered. But the thing that makes these unbelievably phenomenal is this connection over there, that USB-C connection, and these 4 cameras. Now, if you don't know, and I don't know how you wouldn't know, this thing is completely tether-free, and that is unbelievable in the VR world. Now, not too long ago, you needed pretty much the best, baddest PC you could get just to run VR games, period. Like, you could make do with a little bit of a cheaper one, but for the most part, you needed a beastly gaming computer to run VR at all. This thing runs a modified smartphone chipset. Like, what? But again, that's been covered to death. What I want to focus on in this video is how unbelievably far VR has come in the last, call it, 8 years. And to do that, we're gonna need the grandfather. So just move that aside for a second. Now, if you don't know, the DK2, this was, you had the DK1, which was extremely experimental. The DK2 is the closest that Oculus got to a final headset before they actually released the Rift. And this is basically, for all intents and purposes, a fully functional VR headset. There's nothing that some VR headsets can do now that this can't do. Obviously, you can't do fancy controllers, but keep in mind, the first Rift that came out came with a setup that was one camera, one headset, and an Xbox controller. And what do we have in this box? one quite dirty headset, one camera, and I don't have the Xbox controller here, but I had my own one at the time. So, and also a whole bunch of cables, as you expect. Also, this box has held up remarkably well over the years. So we'll just put that aside. This awesome little thing was my first introduction into VR about 8 years ago, if I remember correctly. It hasn't been out of this box in a while. But obviously this is still a development kit. But what does that mean? What it meant at the time was this came out for people to develop the software that would later run on these. Much later, obviously. Sorry, these. Much later, obviously. But this was more or less the first modern incarnation of a VR headset. The DK1 was... The really big differentiator with this is this IR tracker. And that lets you have spatial movement, which the first one didn't have, which is what led to countless people getting seasick, motion sick. Now, this headset is very, very different in a lot of ways. One, I've got to be careful doing this, it's like a camera lens. You can't let dust get in. One, it had detachable lenses that were big thickums. That meant you could change the lenses for different, if you had different prescriptions. You didn't need to wear glasses. I don't need to wear glasses in these. Normally, I wear glasses. I didn't have to wear glasses with these. I have to wear glasses with these. But not just that, this thing was built for playing with. You have detachable cables. You have, where's it now? Extra ports that you can plug things into. Yes, I did rock a Leap Motion back in the day and played the one demo that actually worked with it. I'll see if I can find some recordings of what that demo looked like. It was fun for about 10 seconds. But what this thing did was pique my curiosity to a level that nothing else had before. I was never into the technology as much as I had been into VR when I got this thing. Now, I'm not a developer at all. I got this purely to play with, which they didn't really want you to do. But this thing, today, has held up remarkably well. Apart from, you know, the dirt and grime over the years. This thing's about 8 years old. And then let's not forget about the camera. Now, this is not nearly as nice as the cameras that came out on the first consumer Rift, but this thing worked. It's not really a camera, it's more an infrared receiver, but camera. And in this, there is, I don't know, call it 30 odd infrared LEDs that shine. And this has a sensor that lets you see those. And that is what gives you tracking, you know, left, right, up, down, back, forth, because it could triangulate all of the little dots that this would make. This, by comparison, is completely different. This has no infrared LEDs, no external camera, no external sensors whatsoever. All this has is these, which I think are infrared cameras, or black and white cameras, I don't know if they're infrared or not, that basically take a video of your surroundings, that use, you know, machine learning and all the other fancy, you know, $10 words, and it lets these cameras, along with the smarts inside, turn that room that you're in into a 3D space and track this in the space purely with cameras. What? Like how? Going 8 years from this absolute clunky this clunky solution to something that is as seamless as this is almost unheard of. There's not many things that progress that quickly. And when this first came out, there was no games. There was no Beat Saber. There was no any of the exclusives that the other one has. There was only like random tech demos that you could download from weird websites of the developers, and there was a repository for some of them, but it was hit or miss whether it worked because the software got so updated so quickly, and it was fun, but it was a challenge to use this thing. But when it worked brilliantly. Like the tracking sometimes, I mean, obviously, you can't track if you turn around. There's nothing on the back. But the tracking was, at least as good as this. And this is 8 years ago. And there's things that this has that this just doesn't. Obviously, this has a lot more things that this doesn't, but let's not get into that right yet. This has distance control for how far the lenses are away from your eyes. This doesn't have that. Nothing. You do have spacers if you've got glasses on, which are very fiddly to work with, but hey, it's something. Also, these do have a much better ergonomic face piece than this does. This is just, foam, and it will get manky and gross after years of use. This isn't too bad. I think I washed it at some point. It's not too bad, but it's still not great. Let's not forget about the giant mess of cables that you got to deal with, that you just don't have to deal with this, unless you want to. I'll get into that in a bit. This has to be plugged into a computer to be used at all. There's no smarts in this whatsoever. This is very much a dumb device, which has led to this lasting so long. Oculus, in their latest software, still has baked in support for this ancient headset. Now, they say it's unsupported, they say it doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. It just works. I've plugged it in the other day and it works fine, which is amazing. Now, obviously, the screen on this, I think this is actually the screen from a Galaxy Note 3, which is kind of incredible. I'm a cell phone technician, so it's always fascinating when stuff like that happens. Like, literally, you can peel back all the shielding and everything and see Samsung logos on it. But this, even though it doesn't have the best resolution or the best field of view, or actually I think the field of view is pretty similar, but anyway, it doesn't have the best resolution. The screen door effect is quite bad on this. I can play modern games on an 8-year-old console, headset, whatever you want to call it, and it works just fine. Now, remember, the CV1 came out with a system just like this, meaning that there is an entire generation of games that were made for an experience like this, which means that today I can sit down with this and enjoy a game. Star Wars Squadrons, for example, this is the only headset that I've played it on, and it is awesome to fly around in a TIE fighter and look around you and see everything and have it just work well. Today, a game that was made 6 or 7 years after this came out, like, what? In Steam, no less. Now, that amount of compatibility is quite fascinating and quite special, but this, to me personally, has another level of special compatibility that I'll get into in a bit. So let's put the grandfather away and the camera, and let's bring back the young one. Now, the thing that, without a shadow of a doubt, makes this the best headset you can buy for the money is the fact that this is also a fully fledged PC VR headset. Now, I know this has also been talked about to death, but the importance of that cannot be understated. This is going to be many people's first VR experience, purely because of the incredible price that this thing hits. And I know a lot of that is subsidized by Facebook, Meta, Oculus, Book, whatever you want to call it. But the fact that you could buy this, which I'm from South Africa, this cost me, going on about 7,000 rand, which is, about $300 to get this landed in my country, no issues from Amazon, and this is a fully fledged VR experience. This is kind of the only way that you're going to get a good experience, and a good experience for under, $2,000, $3,000 if you include the PC that you need to run typical headsets. And this can do that as well. And that's where that little port comes into play. Now, when you connect this to a PC and run Oculus Link and get it all working, which is surprisingly easy, which is shocking considering how fundamentally different the different companies that work on this stuff feel about all this. It just works as a PC VR headset. Steam picks it up as a Quest 2. Like, that means that between Oculus and Steam, Oculus had to build in drivers for this specific headset, and like the models show up in the software for these controllers. It's not like it just overlays generic other Oculus controllers. It's specifically these controllers, which then can tie into Steam, and in Steam VR, these controllers pop up and everything just feels seamless. Like, that is basically like Google making a phone and Apple making the operating system for it, and it just working. Like, what? And I know it's a lot less complicated than that, because a lot of the stuff for this is open source because of things that were in the past, but considering this is effectively a Facebook device, and the fact that it works so seamlessly with competitors' software, it's amazing. I mean, the games on this are ludicrously expensive. Buy Beat Saber if you're going to get one of these. It's completely worth it. Everything else, buy on Steam. The reason I say that is because Beat Saber, you move around a lot. However, everything else, and there are some other games where you move around a lot, but most other things, much more slow paced and much more about the experience, like Half-Life Alyx on this, or a lot of the older VR games that came out in the beginning of the HTC Vive era, like Job Simulator and all them. It's perfect. It runs perfectly. Any PC VR game, apart from one that I found issues with, works perfectly with this, and that is absolutely incredible. The one VR game that I had issues with this was a game called Takelink's House Party, which is a really cool sounding game, but it's kind of in like development and not really out yet properly, and it didn't want to play nicely with this. But other than that, every single PC VR game worked flawlessly with this thing, wirelessly. Now, I keep forgetting my side. That connector is cool. You can plug it up to a computer and it works well. However, the issues that I've seen with these, or that I've heard about with these, with the connectors being a little bit fragile, has made me worried about the longevity of having a cable constantly connected to this. I don't have the original fancy cable that's at a perfect 90-degree angle and doesn't put strain on it. I had another USB cable that I was just using, and I like tied around the loop of the headset, and it worked, but I got a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm using virtual desktop to use this on a fast Wi-Fi connection, and it works so well, like genuinely amazingly. It is an experience that you cannot even get with $1,000 VR headset. I know you can, because you can get wireless packs for it, but I mean, out of the box for $300, a wireless PC VR headset. I don't have it. Oopsie. I don't have enough hands to wave around magically. That is incredible value. Like, sure, there's some things that it doesn't do well at, because you need a good Wi-Fi connection, and also it can lag and drop out. But overall, for me, it's been very solid. That is why this is such an unbelievable value. There's nothing that it doesn't do. You want wired PC VR? You got it. You want wireless PC VR? You got it. You got standalone VR? You got it. You can literally go to a beach and play VR with this. Like, I mean, I wouldn't do it. Water, especially salt water and electronics, not a good idea. But you could if you wanted to, and there's nothing stopping you. But back onto that little issue with that USB port. Now, there's been a few pictures of those USB ports burning out spectacularly going around the internet, and people getting worried about it, me included, as I only saw those pictures a couple days after I bought the fucking thing. But from what I've seen, it's generally not an issue. But like I said, I work as a software technician. I wanted to see, let me see if I can, go online, order a part, so I've got one spare just in case. As far as I have seen, you cannot buy a replacement charging port for this. Now, I don't care about how difficult it is to get into this. I have, pushing a couple thousand, 10,000 phones, whatever. Getting into this and fixing something isn't an issue for me. But what is a very big issue for me on multiple levels is not being able to get the fucking part. It's an issue in the sense that I can't fix it if something goes wrong, but also, why are they not supporting this in the age of right to repair, where the best thing you can do as a company is to make these devices supported in terms of parts? Why are they not supplying parts for these? Even just, I know a lot about how realistic supply sourcing for spares works. Even just an offshore Chinese supplier selling a compatible charging port, because realistically Facebook, Meta, OcuQuest sources that supplier or sources that charging port from a Foxconn or from some other supplier, and I'm surprised that no one has figured out what that is and has given a listing for it yet. But maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Also, this thing, if you're like me, when you're playing, especially a game like Beat Saber, where it's a very physical, exercisey game, this gets covered in sweat. I am very surprised that there is no, and I looked, IP rating for this. The odds of this over the years getting corroded because of sweat is there. Now, it may actually be IP protected in some small ways, like there's no gaps into the inside of it that you can see, but over time, salty water, that's what sweat is, can get to electronics. And if you've ever seen what a fitness watch or a fitness wearable looks like after a couple of years of someone running with it or whatever constantly, the underside gets liquid damaged, even in a water resistant watch. It just happens. Salt water kills electronics like you can't believe. Now, I'm not saying that is going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. I love this thing and I don't really want to replace it. But this thing has pushed me to do something that I've never done in my life. I took out insurance on this thing because I can't fix it. Because if something goes wrong, I have no recourse to fix it. There's no supply. There's no real returns. There's no returns procedure for this outside of America. I would have to ship this all the way back to America with like 3,000 Rand postage, or equivalent of like, $100 postage, just to get this back there for them to, say it's my fault? I don't know. So I've got insurance on this thing so I can replace it, because that's the only thing I can do. I would love to be able to fix this if something goes wrong, but I can't. That is basically my only issue with this device at all. And considering it as a package, that is such a minor issue, and I've realistically solved it anyway, that I have recommended this thing to just about every single person I know that is into this kind of stuff. For comparison, I recommended this to no one. I still loved it though. It's awesome. Well, that's been this video on the Oculus Quest 2. It's been done to death, but I thought I'd throw in a spin of it from a different kind of perspective, one where it's not just looking at this device in a vacuum, even in a vacuum in today's world. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.